Hi, I'm Jeff from Recruit Rockstars, and I'm making this video to help you avoid losing candidates at the last second. Look, this is something as a headhunter that has been an issue my whole career. It just happens, but it doesn't have to, or at least it doesn't have to happen as often as you might think. And I want to take you through a model that I was taught many years ago, and I use it all the time. I mean, I literally have it printed out here on my desk, and I always ask myself, am I doing these key steps? And I'm going to go through the steps with you. You don't need to scramble to write it down because there's a lot to it, but stick with me. And I'm happy to email you a copy. If you just send me an email, jeff@recruitrockstars.com, I'll send it to you, and you can take a look at it, print it out, and put it on your desk. And I think it'll be really helpful. So let's kind of get into it. And I'm going to blow it up here, and I'm going to shrink myself down here. Okay, so here's what you need to know about the recruiting process. There's 4 distinct phases. You might think it's kind of one long process or 12 different steps, but there's really 4 phases, and let's kind of talk about it here. So there's the phase before the offer is made, and then there's the phase from the offer to getting the yes, which is the signature. Then there's the phase of the signature to the first day of work. And then there's the phase after the person starts working on the job. These are 4 distinct phases of your recruiting process. Even when they start on the job, they're not totally in the boat. You have to remember that. So as a headhunter, I've worked really hard to remember these kind of 4 phases, and there's a bunch of things to do in each phase. And so let's go through those. And I'm going to move myself up here just so I can kind of follow along. So let's start up here. Sell yourself. That's pretty obvious. But the mistake people make, and I don't think it comes from being cocky or kind of a swagger, is we just kind of forget that your best candidate who's frequently currently working, a passive candidate, needs to be courted. They need to understand a number of things. They need to understand the industry because they may not work in your industry. They need to understand the company, so all about your company. They need to understand the manager, the hiring manager that they're going to work for. Remember, that's a big one because people usually quit their manager. And so they want to know the new manager that they're going to be working for. Can I learn from that person? Can I grow from that person? Can I fill their job at some point? And then the 4th and final thing is the job. And that's usually where people kind of jump in. They kind of start to sell the job. And that's important. But don't forget to sell your industry, the company, the hiring manager, and the job. So all those things happen. But the mistake people often make is they recruit, sell. They kind of wait till the last minute. They figure, well, I'm the employer. That's just a lowly candidate. It doesn't work that way, especially right now in a candidate's market. You want to recruit and sell, recruit and sell, recruit and sell all the way throughout the process. So that's the first thing that you got to remember to do throughout up until the point of the offer. And you're always selling right until that point of the offer. Even making the offer is an important selling opportunity. Let's move to the second one, explaining the interview process. So this is incredibly important and very frustrating to a lot of candidates because they have no idea what your interview process is. Every company's interview process is different. Many people don't even have an interview process. They kind of make it up as they go. And they say, hey, Charlie, you interview this guy. And hey, Sally, you interview this guy. And pretty soon you've got 10 or 20 people interviewing candidates who, by the way, may have a full-time job and they need to work all this in. So decide your recruiting process from the onset and explain it up front to the candidate. I do this on the very first call. I set their expectations. I say, here's where we are in the process. We're either late in the process and we got to hustle to get this done, or we're early in the process. So I set their expectations that we may not make an offer for 6 weeks, whatever. Here are the steps. Here's who you would be meeting. I don't keep that opaque to the candidate, and candidates really appreciate that kind of transparency. Okay, let's go to the obvious one, which is getting to know the candidate. Now, I've written a book all about this, and if you want a copy, when you send me an email, just send jeff@recruitrockstars.com. I'll send you a copy of the book, but I talk a lot about how to interview, how to get to know the candidate, how to do reference checks properly. You're going to know everything about this candidate before you make the offer. So all these things need to happen before an offer's made. It's a lot to know. But that is not the end of the process. That's just the beginning of the process. Now we have to get the yes, which is where we go to this kind of second phase, right? I've given the offer, and now I got to get the signature. Now, a lot of people ask me, do I use exploding offers? Do I put a deadline on the offer? And the answer is yes. In most cases, I do. If I've done these things properly, I shouldn't need to give the candidate a lot of time. They should pretty much know whether they're in or out. We've already talked about compensation from the very first call. They've met a bunch of the team. I've sold them on the opportunity. I don't know what else I can tell them. And P.S., I have a backup candidate, which I always recruit for a backup candidate. So I can't afford to risk losing that backup candidate by giving my first choice candidate all the time in the world to make a decision. So there is a deadline. Now, I give 36 hours, and I'm very clear about it. And by the way, if I don't have the offer in hand until that last hour, I know something's wrong. The right candidate who knows this is a great opportunity for them and the comp is where they need it to be signs that offer pretty quickly because they're super excited about it. It's more of a formality. By the way, I also present the offer verbally first, gain agreement, do any negotiation, and then I paper it and put it in writing. So when they get it in writing, that is not the first time they've had to go through the offer. They've already heard it from me or the hiring manager verbally. Now, let's talk about these key steps after I give the offer. There's push and pull. Push and pull is a technique that I used long ago, and there's nothing smarmy or gamey about it. It's just a reality of a negotiation to not lose control of the process, right? The candidate has plenty of control. They can say yes or no, but I also have some control, and that's indicated by the fact I have a backup candidate. So I'm using a push and pull technique, and this is something that comes very naturally, and you develop a comfort with it over time. Push and pull means you pull, right? Just like romance or attraction or seduction, right? We're pulling the candidate to us by reminding them of these great opportunities, the attractiveness of the industry, the company, etc. And we're also simultaneously pushing them away by making them understand that you're not the only person in this process. There's a backup candidate. And that gets the attention of candidates. Hopefully you're not having to bluff because you really have a backup candidate. But when you push and pull simultaneously, you're able to keep control of the process. I've done this for many years, and it really helps get the yes more often than not. Now, you got to remember the average offer acceptance rate is only 66%, which means 1 out of 3 times you're going to have to go to that backup candidate. And that is incumbent upon having a backup candidate and not losing them, which means, to my earlier point, you can't give your first choice candidate all the time in the world to sign the offer. So think about that push and pull, and again, the book kind of lays that out too. Outlining the cost of a renege. Renege or renegotiation or taking the offer and then reneging and walking away from the offer is something that I still see far more often than you would expect. It's probably happened to you. It's incredibly painful. And it doesn't have to happen, or at least it doesn't have to happen anywhere near as often as it does. But you can't just hope. Hope is not a strategy when it comes to business or recruiting. You need to explain to the candidate and have a conversation with them about the cost to them of reneging. You've probably heard the statistic very frequently that people who accept a counter offer from their company are usually gone within a year anyway. And in my experience, that's been very true. Once they indicate to the company that they're leaving, they give notice, and then they accept our offer. And then that company, their current company, magically gives a counter offer and a title and a money and shows them the love, and then they renege on our offer. They're usually gone within a year. That's been my experience. And they're gone because the trust has been broken, right? They have signaled to their employer that they can no longer count on their services. And so that employer starts to worry and wonder and look for their replacement. And it's incumbent upon you to explain all that. Don't assume the candidate knows, especially a first-time candidate, a younger individual, earlier in their career. They don't understand maybe the impact on themselves, their credibility, their reputation, their employer, and you, the bridges that they're going to burn by reneging. They haven't thought all that through. If they're perhaps a first-time job seeker or younger in their career, you need to explain it to them and really outline the cost. The cost is this offer is going to go away. We're probably not going to have an interest in you in the future because you've kind of screwed us by reneging, especially if we let our backup candidate go. Now we have to start the whole process. You've signaled to your employer that your days are numbered, and you may find yourself without a chair when the music stops. And I found that when you have that conversation to the point of actually role-playing, I actually practice with the candidate. I'll say, well, what are you going to do when they give you a counteroffer? And the candidate always says, oh, they're not going to give me a counteroffer. They don't do counteroffers. And I'll say, yeah, but just indulge me. Let's pretend they give you a counteroffer. And they say, well, I wouldn't even hear of it. You really need to kind of push on that and have that conversation, that rehearsal. How are you going to resign? When are you going to resign? Where are you going to resign? A lot of candidates don't feel like resigning via Zoom to their manager who's across the country. So don't take any of that for granted. That all has to happen from the time you give the signature. From the time you give the offer before you get the signature. Even after you get the signature, you have to worry. We'll get to that in a minute. Planning for the worst case. That's throughout this entire process. Things can always go wrong. I am always thinking about, if I lose this candidate, what am I going to do? Tell me about my backup candidate. They should be equally acceptable. I should be just as happy with them. Are there other people I should be talking to? Should always dig your well before you're thirsty. Maybe I need to promote someone internally if I lose this candidate. Maybe I need to promote someone on an interim basis. Maybe I'm decided I'm going to do the job myself until I find the right person. But I'm always thinking about my backup plan when it comes to this offer to the first date of them starting. Okay, let's move on. So we've got the signature. We made the offer. Now we've got the signature. We passed the renege risk, right? They've resigned and didn't get a counter offer, or they got a counter offer and turned it down, which is what we're looking for. Now is a really dangerous place. There's this gap. And during this gap, which is anywhere from 2 weeks to maybe 2 months, candidates can drift. You can lose that candidate. You may think, well, I'm just going to send them some swag and a t-shirt and they'll be fine. And I wish I could say it was that easy. That's the table stakes. But over those 2 weeks to 2 months, you need to stay in touch. And I don't just mean you. I mean people on your team need to show them the love. Your CEO needs to show them the love. You need to do everything you can to pull them into the boat, right? You've got them out of the other boat. But just because you've got the signature on the offer letter doesn't mean you've got their heart and mind won over. That's what I mean by pulling them into the boat. So staying in touch. I will talk to candidates regularly, texting, calling, emailing, sending them stuff. I send them a book, The First 90 Days, which is a phenomenal best-selling book about how to onboard yourself. I'll have other people in the organization reach out to them. I'll see if they want to do some background reading to prepare for their entry, even include them on some calls, but I get them engaged. I worry a lot about vacations because people can go to the beach in Hawaii and start wondering, did I get the best job? Did I take the best offer? The other thing that happens is you have to remember that they called all their references for you to talk to. And a lot of those references were former managers who will say, hey, Charlie, I didn't know you were thinking about leaving your company. If I knew that, I would have talked to you about this opportunity. And I've seen that happen many times over the years. So stay in touch between signature date and the job start date. Okay, after they start, there's still some things you got to do. Your job is not done. Starting from learning from renegotiations, learning from renegs, it's going to happen. Do a post-audit, do a post-mortem. Where did we go wrong? Did we offer enough? Did we stay in touch? Did we have the counter-offer conversation? Did we give too long and leave the offer just kind of hanging out there? You've got to learn from these mistakes. It's no different than learning from a lost customer or a lost investor. What do you do when you lose a candidate? Keep a blacklist. So unfortunately, that comes with the territory. When a candidate changes their mind and reneges and doesn't come, we're not going to consider them in the future. And I run an executive search firm, and we're not going to talk to them because they violated the integrity rule, which is the very first thing my clients are looking for. And so we keep that blacklist, and it's not something that people want to find themselves on. And then finally, implementing a graceful leave policy. So this is the perfect time when someone joins your company to talk about their departure. And you may say, well, what does that mean? Why would I be talking about their departure? The reality is they are going to leave one day. Either you're going to part ways with them or they are going to resign and seek a better opportunity. The odds of them staying with your company forever and this being their last job are pretty nil. Having the discussion when they start about what life is going to look like, how you're going to have that discussion together, it's the perfect time to do it. It takes all the pressure off because you haven't seen their performance. You haven't really seen anything. But you say, look, Charlie, I know this is not going to be the last job you've ever had. And I don't want to be surprised by you quitting one day and not giving me an opportunity to make sure you're happy and well cared for, well compensated. And I promise not to surprise you either with 2 weeks notice on my end. And you have an agreement. And this is not my idea. This is something that many companies do. A really successful one here in Chicago, Jellyvision, has done this for many years. And the manager and the new hire have that conversation. And it's called a graceful leave conversation. We're going to leave gracefully. Either I'm going to give you notice so you're not surprised. Obviously, there are some exceptions to that. If someone has a gross violation of a policy or something, or is caught stealing money from the company, but you're also agreeing to give me plenty of notice so I can start to think about your replacement and lining up your backup. And it works really well. It takes a little bit of trust, but the perfect time to do that is when the person first joins your company. So I know that's a lot to absorb. I've got it on paper. I'll send it to you if you want. Just send me an email, jeff@recruitrockstars.com. Put this on your wall, and you will never lose, maybe not never, but you shouldn't lose a candidate ever again. I hope that's helpful, and best of luck. Happy hunting.